All right, we're going live in this very moment.
All right, thank you. Well, welcome to the first talk of the climate talks from the Young Climate Collaboration Berlin. Oh, wow. And it's the first one of the next 6 climate talks. And today we're going to talk about buildings and urban development. There's a live stream now on. You all have the cameras on, that's pretty cool. And I think I'll just pass it on to Yannick.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Johannes. Thank you very much, Hannah, Elise, and a big hello from my side as well. My name is Yannick Petersen. I'm part of the YCCB, the Young Climate Collaboration Berlin project management team at Lab Concepts, which is the event agency supporting the Berlin Senate Department for the Environment, Transport and Climate Protection, in the creation and conduction of the Young Climate Collaboration Berlin project. And it is a great honor for me to welcome you here to today's kickoff event of the Young Climate Campus Berlin. Yeah, exactly. Just a few words about that project. The Young Climate Collaboration Berlin, YCCB project, is part, again, of the Berlin Energy and Climate Protection Program, short the BEK 2030. That is a program for the implementation of the Paris Agreement and is a first and very important stepping stone on Berlin's way to becoming a carbon neutral city by 2030. The project is primarily aimed at young adults between the ages of 18 and 28, and its goals are fairly clear. It is for the participants to collect information, but also identify open questions and action areas within the 6 action areas of the BEK 2030, and from there devise their own visions, ideas, and ultimately claims for the future. And that is what we are doing on this climate campus, the event series leading up to the Young Climate Conference taking place in June this year. On this campus, we have 3 types of events, one being the climate talks, which is our first one being today on the action area buildings and urban development. We have 5 more climate talks coming up on the other action areas. There will be toolbox workshops, which are more methodological, where you will learn how to communicate climate facts, for example, and also learn about digital participation. And last but certainly not least, towards the end of the campus, a series or 2 participatory workshops where you will be able to start formulating or working out those claims, which will then be formulated and ultimately handed over to political decision makers at the Young Climate Conference itself. And last but not least, about the project, we also have an Instagram campaign that actually launched this week, so just in time for the kickoff of the campus as well. So please find us under YCC Berlin, and this Instagram campaign, young media agents are creating the content management themselves around the topics that I just talked about. That is all from my side, actually, just to let you know that you won't hear much from me during the event, or actually nothing at all, but I will be working very hard in the back office with our digital or virtual whiteboard called Miro, where I will be collecting important discussion points, possibly open questions, and anything else that we might find interesting, and that if time allows it, we also can have a look at that whiteboard at the very end of this session. It will obviously be further developed over the course of the campus and serve as a good basis, hopefully, for developing your ideas at the end. But that is all from my side. I'm wishing everybody a very interesting and successful event. Thank you for the speakers for attending this. Thank you for the audience for being here, and passing over to Hannah Elise to the moderation. Thank you.
Yeah, Great, Yannick. I'm also really happy to be here. Just very shortly, who are we, me and Johannes? We're going to be the facilitators of today's event, and we are both part of the Kippung Collective. In English, you could say the Tipping Point Collectives, and we make participatory, emancipatory workshops and work for climate justice. Yeah, and today we will be here for you. And just a couple of things before we go forward. To remind you, we really invite you to participate, ask questions, also ask critical questions, and you can just raise your hand or raise your hand with the hand raising signal on the reactions. And then we can go on. But I have the feeling it's been a long day for everybody, I guess. So let's get a little bit start. Let's just roll our shoulders before we begin this beautiful talk on building and urban development. Yeah, so let's get some movement in there. Also, everybody who are there looking our live stream, or maybe we also say yes with the head and look maybe right, look maybe left. Because we know that we're all going to be more alive in the online virtual world when we're also present in our bodies. All right, so I see also Marie's beautifully stretching her neck. Nice. So let's start. I'm going to hand over the word to my colleague Johannes.
Okay, so today is going to be about building and urban development, and we have a website where you can check out the other talks. You also find there the code of conduct, and I'll just talk a few seconds about it, because what we want is we don't really want to have any problematic language or assault, especially not against sex or about sexism, racism, and stuff like that. So if anything happens today or in any event of the YCCB, you can today just write in the chat, Marie. She's waving the hands. But in general, you can also you can also write an email, and you find the email on the website. In general, there are a lot of information on the website, so just check it out, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's your turn.
Great. Today we will be working together. We will have two experts present, Florian Köhl and Tobias Schäfer. So Yannick, yeah, there comes Florian, and then we get also Tobias. Maybe I can say just a couple of words about Florian. He's an architect with a lot of experience in research and teaching. He founded in 2002 the FATCall Architects, and they concentrate in their work on building association in Berlin. And they're focused on developing more cooperative architectural models and affordable living, and working as well for the shared use of public space. So really important topics. Florian is also, he's been teaching a long time in the Technical University of Berlin and in the Bartlett School of Architecture in London. So full-on professional on that. And then we also have Tobias Schäfer. He's an urban planner with a background in urban development, housing, and geographic information systems. If I understood right, you're now working at the Senate Department for Urban Development in Berlin, and you work on strategic planning on urban development plans and housing and climate. Yeah, beautiful to have you here, Tobias and Florian.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now we actually would like to start with a small associative game with the whole group. So actually now, Yannick, if you may, you can put us all again in a gallery mode. And because I have a ball here in my hands, and this is an associative ball. And I would like to pass this on. This ball is about urban development and housing, yeah? And I will pass this on to a person, and you will just catch it and shake it. And what's your first associative idea, what you connect with urban development and housing? So I'm going to pass this first, urban development and housing. You have to catch this ball, yeah? I'm going to pass it to Tobias. You have to catch it, yeah? and put on your microphone. And what's your first associated? What do you connect with that?
I mean, I work in this field a long time, so I connect a lot with it. It's not
so
easy to put in words.
It's about holding the ball.
But for me, it's chances.
Cool. And you pass it on.
And I pass it to Anna.
Great.
For me, I associate future with this. And I pass the ball to Marie.
I associate change with it, and I pass it over to, let me see, Izzy.
Mm-hmm. Pass on the ball, Marie. Yeah.
I think I associate sustainable building mostly with like insulation and proper building materials. And I'm going to pass the ball on to Clara.
I think I associate with the future as well, and I'm going to pass the ball to Florian.
Okay, I got it. I associate my association with affordable housing, or was it affordable housing? No, it was. I forgot already what it was, but I think it's mainly about how we want to live, that we can live really freely and in the way we would like to live. And I throw it out to Johannes.
Cool. Sustainable living, Hannah-Lisa.
Thank you. So we're not going to make the whole round. So I think I'm going to take sustainable living, and I'm going to take dreams, because I think a lot of people combine dreams with living sustainably. Okay, cool. Thank you for this little interactive start. We will have some similar energizers through the way, but now, Yannick, you can again put us, Florian, Tobias, me, and Johannes on spotlight, because now we will get a little bit deeper to the topic. Please, Johannes.
Okay, so as you maybe know, Berlin is facing a growing population, and while we have on the one hand maybe not enough space for everyone, maybe not yet, I don't know, maybe we'll find out. And on the other hand, we have climate change, which is already affecting Berlin, but at the same time, obviously, Berlin is also affecting climate change. So the question for today is, how do we work those things together? So how do we have to develop buildings? How do we have to develop whole regions within Berlin to make it or to adapt it to the BEK 2030? And to have a number for you, 49% of Berlin's CO2 emissions in 2012 are coming from the sector of buildings. So it's actually a big part of all the CO2 emissions. But at the same time, it's not only about CO2 emissions. We also have problems with biodiversity loss and other parts that are in the part like environmental issues. So I think we will also focus on that. And I have a first question. We'll just ask at first Tobias and then Florian. And the question to Tobias is, has climate protection not been taken seriously enough in this field of action so far? What are the urgent needs for action in the field of buildings and urban development in order to achieve the climate goal of Berlin as a carbon-free city in 2050? What do you think?
Obviously, there's a lot to do, but thank you very much, and also thank you very much for the introduction so far. As you said before, I'm an urban developer, so I'm working at the Center Department for Urban Development and Housing, and what I want to do is talk a little bit out of that perspective. So what we do is we look at the city and we try to develop the city in certain ways, or we try to develop certain neighborhood in certain ways. And when it comes to climate, we have basically two main goals. So on the one side, we want to look at how can we build a city, how can we reduce the CO2 emission of the city of Berlin, and then also on the other side, how can we adapt Berlin to the climate changes that we have. So how can we make the city that we have enough cool spots? How can we create certain areas with water? How can we keep the water in the city? But I think you will have also another workshop just on this topic. Yeah, so in the field that we are, as you said, and you're absolutely right, Berlin is a growing city for some years now, and that's something that we in urban planning need to adapt to. So we want everybody who wants to come to Berlin being able to come to Berlin. And for that, we need a certain amount of housing, of apartments within the city. And what we do is we look at how can we get to that goal, and how can we give everybody in the city housing. And obviously a big part of it is how can we reuse different structures, building structures within the city, and also how can we build within our city structures. We have a lot of developments also kind of outside, new neighborhoods, new developments, which we also need in the city, but our main focus is to how can we create housing within our existing structures, which gives us a lot of advantages. Because when you go out onto the green fields and build new housing there, that's not very climate friendly. And in general speaking, more dense areas in the city or more dense neighborhoods is, in generally speaking, way more climate friendly than one family home areas outside of the city are. So what we kind of looking in is how can we build this compact, to a certain degree, compact city, climate friendly, adapted to the climate change, and how can we build a city with short ways? So how can we build a city where you can have housing, where you can meet your friends, where you can work all in the same neighborhood, and reduce traffic between these between the neighborhoods, basically. So how can we like create this kind of city? With that comes a lot of challenges to build housing within a city. We have an existing city. We have people living in the city, and also buildings are there for quite some time, for hundreds of years, most of the time. So what we're looking into, what do we want to change, and where do we want to develop our neighborhoods? What do we want to change, and how do we want to do that? And we have a lot of challenges coming with that. We talked before about the BEK, which is kind of the goal, what we are together working to find new ideas within that. I think it's very important to have this scale of a neighborhood in mind. I think we can affect most when you think on the scale in neighborhoods. What do we need in neighborhoods? What do we need to add in neighborhoods? Schools, social infrastructure, also housing. How can we have these neighborhoods less CO2, have less CO2 emissions through these neighborhoods? And how can we make incentives to people who own houses in these areas or who live in these areas to be more CO2 friendly, or to produce less CO2? And that's a big task for us that we have in Berlin, and we'll have to maneuver our way through all the topics that are important in Berlin: housing, climate, social infrastructure. Yeah, maybe that as far as a start.
Yeah, thank you. One question about that. Do you think we are on the good way to achieve the goals?
I mean, when you're talking about 2050 to be CO2 environment neutral, CO2 emission neutral, I mean, the housing sector, it's really hard. As I said, I think the main challenge is not in what we build new, actually, where we also have to look at to build these new areas or new buildings as climate friendly and with as less possible CO2 emission. But the big problem is the city is built to 95% to a certain degree. So we have a high number of existing buildings, and it's really hard to go into these neighborhoods and change like the CO2 emission from these buildings. So I don't like I'm not an expert on CO2 emission and what we can reach, but definitely we need to do a lot more in the next few years to get this done. But it's definitely not an easy task. It's very complicated because I mean we have some. I'm speaking as a state employee. We have some state-owned companies which provide housing in Berlin, so we have a certain influence. But most of the parts of Berlin are privately owned. So we have to find ways to convince these people to do certain things with their houses. And that can be very difficult, and definitely how the situation is when you look at how the temperature will rise in the next few years, we definitely have to do more than we did in the past.
All right, thank you.
I also actually saw from Michael, from the audience, you showed something on your screen. Can you do it again? Yes, 2030. I have the feeling often we talk about 2050, but actually Berlin should also achieve the climate goals of 2030. So these you say we need urgent more actions, and often the climate policy, what is demanded is maybe people are maybe afraid that it's clashing with a concept of good life. So now I have a question for Florian. How can the densification of living space and the reutilization of urban areas be reconciled with the quality of life? Because I know maybe many people are afraid, I need to have my garden, I need to have my house. Like if we do more climate action in the field of building, that people who are afraid they lose their quality of life, especially maybe people from the middle class or people who are owning property. So I'm asking you, how can these two things be reconciled? Or maybe you even have some surprising ideas. How could this make the life better when we do also climate action in urban planning and housing?
I think first of all, I'm trying now to also maybe I think it's really great that you as the young young generation, or whoever this means, but whatever this means, but you're ready to ask questions. So I try to also be not too try to be understandable for you in the moment. And one thing, obviously, as Tobias just said, there's a lot of private ownership in Berlin. And that is on one hand, it used to be a place where you could rent your house from someone. So you don't have to own a place, you could rent a place, which is a very interesting model. But now at the moment, as the rents in the beginning, Berlin was very interesting because it didn't cost anything. And so most of your money was in your pocket, and your money was not used to pay rent. So the economy of the city was very interesting because a lot of people could invest their money into new ideas rather into living. And it's the most boring thing for an economy if people spend their money in living. And so Berlin became this very creative place, not because Berlin is creative. I think Berlin as a city, I'm sorry, Tobias, but I think it's a very conservative city in terms of the planning strategies. I think it's changing, but I think it's still a very, also the Steinerne Stadt, the stony city, is a very, it's not a very plant-oriented city. It doesn't like uncontrolled green. It likes to control things in a very Prussian way. And therefore, this is one thing that people, when you ask people in these kind of participations, scenarios, a lot of people want this kind of typical block city. So there's still a very strong mindset in what the city should look like. But there's another idea. What you are asking for is much more, how can we live in it? And when I came to Berlin, we could do anything because there was a lot of available space, which is not there anymore. There was a lot of opportunities, and we could also, our first project, we just bought a piece of land. So I think the first thing which I demand is that land should be available, but it should belong to the state. So we're fighting for a long time already for what we now have, or start the beginning of land lease. So it means for all of you, you could have access to land, and that is also an opportunity. This is one thing, and obviously the land that is still there is streets. No, we have a lot of streets, and they belong to cars, and cars are problems. So I think the biggest shift in terms of public space and opportunities for us in the future will be land that is now occupied for for not many people, but with a lot of space for cars. So this will change, and this is a big challenge, because what are we doing with all this land? It should be spatially interesting. It should offer opportunities. And the same thing is with the buildings. I think we still don't understand buildings as a part of our ecosystem. We still see buildings as a sort of thing that is static, that doesn't do anything, that is not, has nothing to do with nature. It's if first you have a building and then you have nature. And so I think we have to change completely our idea. First we have a nature, and then we try to find a space for the building. So I think that's maybe what you're asking is I think the strength of architecture is that it should now really become a part of an ecosystem, and maybe can grow itself, can change in shape, because it's dynamic. It has it works like a plant. It has trees anywhere. It can become even a park. I mean, it has to offer much more as it does right now. We're very boring, I think, in terms of what we deliver as architects.
All right, so you're suggesting that we need a shift in how we use the public space and the land and the streets. So somehow change in urban planning architecture also has to do something with the mobility transformation. Very interesting. Okay, dear people, now I would say we open up for the first questions or comments from the audience, from the people who are here. So Yannick, please, you can also put us now to gallery mode. So we can also all shift to gallery view. Now I would ask everybody who have their camera to also put it on. And yes, you can just raise your hands. And if you have questions to Florian and Tobias or to the whole circle, what would you like to know? What's an urgent question maybe on your mind? You came here today, and what was your question maybe in your mind when you decided to take part? I give you a little moment. Yeah. Yeah, Konrad Beck, there you go. Please. You're still muted. Yeah.
Corina.
Corina.
You both, Tobias as well as Florian, spoke about the challenges. Now my question, on one hand, we have the challenges, yes, of course. But what are for you the best opportunities for the moment, or in the next 20 to 30 years?
Interesting.
Just one question. Opportunities in which way? What do you relate the opportunities to?
Okay. The opportunities to achieve the goal that we can have buildings in 2050 that are more or less CO2 neutral, or not.
If I start, I think it's a very interesting question, because we're looking at the moment we're looking very much at energy, and we're looking very much at material. and construction of buildings. What we're not looking at is, for instance, the way of how we could live together, how we share space, how we use space, how we use the economy of space. What we're also not looking at is new models, how the economy of a building that would maybe need 20 years, then you have all the money in. Why would we not start to use the economy for the owners, and they can start to change their building? Because obviously a lot of things are not there yet, and maybe in 10 years you get other windows and you just rent them and then you change them. So what we would like to see is much more that the building is not seen as a sort of static thing that you make and it's done. I think this will not happen anymore, because there will be soft and hard parts at buildings that can change and that you can adapt. So the structure might be very strong, but the rest might be very changeable, something like that. And also that would allow us a certain flexibility in the way how we could live in the buildings. I think that is one way. And the other way is, can we make buildings become sort of even make the climate better by becoming like breathing machines? Or of course we have a limit of space. We have a roof, usually we have a facade, but we still think in very typical categories. We still think in facades as a facade and how it looks, but we don't see the potential yet. There's a lot of research on it, but that it could become more like some sort of component of the city in terms of an urban ecosystem. This is what we're looking at the moment.
Thank you, Florian. That's interesting. So focusing on the existing buildings. Tobias, could you add something to this?
Yeah, and also to add, I mean, what comes first to my mind is we have I think everybody knows the airport in Tegel, which will be reused now, which is kind of a space, a big space within the city. And we have it's called Schumacher Quartier, which will be a housing area. So this is one of our new neighborhoods. Besides speaking existing neighborhoods, how can we develop them? I think this is a very good project in Berlin, which is supposed to be CO2 neutral when it's built new. And I think also the building new gives you a lot of chances. They're talking about building a lot based on wood in this area, to have like an own, I don't think you can say wood production, but like an own wood preparation workplace where they prepare the wood to be built into the houses. So I think like in the new neighborhoods, there's a lot of good things happening. For me, it's really a question of what I wouldn't concentrate just on the houses in general. I think we talked about the challenges, and it can be really difficult. For me, the important thing really is to look at the whole neighborhood on this level. Like what can we achieve through having everything that you need, as I said before, in the neighborhood. And I think this can take a big part in all this. And yeah, we have to get better to make the houses itself and to think about other materials, to reuse existing materials. From Zurich, as an example, I know that they have like kind of a website or a forum when they have like building material that they used before and then want to reuse within the city to change these or to offer them to somebody else. So I think there can be a lot of interesting ways to find solution to different topics. And I think the reuse of also sealed places in the city to give people affordable housing can be a really good chance to do that. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. So I saw Anya posted a question in the chat. If there are any model cities in Europe. Now you mentioned Zurich. Just for everybody who maybe came a bit later, you can just now time to raise your hand when you have a question. So, but maybe we ask still Florian, do you have another example of European cities where climate targets are well being reconciled with urban planning and housing?
I think there are very different ways of approaching it. Of course, the sort of most design-oriented one is probably Copenhagen, which is completely mad about it, and it's a bit. I think it's a very typical example now. But very interesting for me. Very interesting is that Stockholm is. The whole city of Stockholm is not owned by anyone. The land is owned by the city. You can't buy anything in Stockholm. So what I find interesting is now that the city has the possibility to change things because they still have access to land, and that is something we discuss a lot. I think because we forget, maybe for you it's a bit boring to talk about land, but for me it's the crucial starting moment. For any project can only happen if there's land, and the politics for it are very different. And that is, for instance, a very interesting way of looking at it. But you can see in many cities that they now start with little changes to take away a street or to change their laws towards how you build. And I think there are very different strategies now. What I think for Berlin could be interesting, and Tobias, you talked about the neighborhood. We once made a proposal for a competition for Berlin that you would have like a neighborhood economies as well. So maybe cities also have to learn to give away responsibilities to neighborhoods. Right now, even with the Berlin Leitlinien of participation, there's still a strong idea that the city should plan a city. So there's still a very strong driving moment, because you also need somehow a larger view. But I think you can also start to give away power and empower people in neighborhoods, but also by giving them means. So by making sort of economies in neighborhoods that would allow certain things to happen, and that would maybe also allow to take over to take with you the private owners. So I think they're very interesting ways how we could somehow empower people as well, because there are a lot of clever people around, as well as having a strong city to hold the thing together.
Beautiful, thank you. Violetta, please.
Hi, thank you for that answer. I wanted to follow up to see if you've seen examples where youth are really empowered to have an impact on planning and spatial practices and enhanced mobility. Like where do you see youth fitting into providing this pressure or collaboration with local planners?
Yeah, so the question was about the role of youth, right, Violetta? Yeah. So Tobias and Florian, who wants to go first?
Yeah,
Tobias.
I mean, it's very interesting how you can make your voice heard in cities, and I mean, you're absolutely right, Florian. What you talked about, I think the planning cultures and also in the city of Berlin is changing. We're having now the guidelines for participation as a new project. They're like pretty close to where I work, so it's interesting to follow what they do and how they develop. It's always like a thin line between finding a good participation and how you can involve people, and how can you bring them into planning process. It's something that the people in the cities are learning, and it's something that we as planners from the departments are learning and are getting better with, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to kind of, or I mean, it's a long discussion of what kind of should experts do in urban planning, and where should the input come from. I really, I mean, just this occasion here shows me that there is an interest of people, especially in young people, and when you see the demonstrations for climate protection, and I think what an influence that also has into the public. Definitely, we need more people coming and being involved in what's happening in the cities, and giving them a voice in the city is, in my opinion, really important. And I think that will be getting more and more.
Okay. How about some concrete examples, Florian? Can you
Yeah,
give us a concrete example?
I just changed my background for you, Violeta. So you can go straight to Alexanderplatz tomorrow. I don't know if it will be open tomorrow, but if you want to be engaged, go to it's not called Alexanderplatz anymore. It's Alles Andersplatz, as you can see in. So this was the day. the doubts, I can see doubts, but that's the name they put on the building, which is Haus der Statistik. So I think this is one project which is quite radical in the way that absolutely prime location in the city. Like when you look at the map of prices, of land prices, this is absolutely prime location, and an initiative took over this empty building, which was empty for many years, and then said this should be now a place for artists, for spaces of opportunities, and so they stopped it to be taken down. But now it's a project that will become the new house for the mayor. So there's the district of Mitte, there is the Senate of Berlin, there is the Wohnungsbaugesellschaft Mitte, so like a housing corporation, and they have made a contract together to develop this whole area. And you can be part in this. You can take part. You all can go there. You can go to open meetings, and you can really discuss space. You can discuss program. You can discuss how this place will look like. I think it's at the moment one of the most, I would say, radical projects in terms of participation, and yeah, it's a beginning of a series of projects that are now happening, which is also the one reason is that the Senate, and Tobias, you're right, the Senate has changed the strategy in the last years because of energy of people like you, and also because the planning, the whole idea of planning has changed.
Oh, so redistributing the power. Thank you. Anna, you raised your hand before.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the very interesting inputs. I have a question according to what you said, Florian, more power to the neighborhoods. What do you both think about the referendum? What is now collecting signatures? The Deutsche Wohnen and Co. enteignen. Is this a new chance to more neighborhoods or more power to the people, or is this maybe not a good way? What do you think?
So maybe for everybody who doesn't know the campaign, it's an initiative that's working for the socialization or expropriation of the real estate of Deutsche Wohnen. Yeah. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, in general speaking, it's good to have public housing in cities, and through our land-owned housing companies, we have, like, I think it's about 350,000 apartments already in ownership of the state of Berlin, which gives us really the chance to give housing to people that can't pay the normal prices on the market, and to also have an influence on the Mietspiegels, on the general price of renting in cities. It's very important. I mean, the cooperative, I haven't looked very deeply into it. I mean, what we need to think in Berlin about is how can we give everybody an apartment that this person can live in, and through the initiative, we would, as I understand, would buy as a community, as a state, as we all would buy these apartments from these companies, which would be money, which would be a really high amount of money, which we as a community couldn't spend on other things like schools, kindergartens, whatever. And at the end, it's not an initiative where we could get new housing places. So the number of apartments where we really have a big problem that everybody finds an apartment. I have a friend who's at the moment looking for a cheap apartment for 800 euros, and it's basically close to impossible. She's looking all over the city. So it's really it's a really hard discussions, and there are definitely positive and negative ideas behind it. But yeah, that's as much as I can put to it now, as I can say.
Tobias, isn't it so that because of the speculation with the real estate, the prices are going up, and it's just making the situation socially very unjust, because
Sure.
then there are a lot of people who simply cannot afford to live in the city. So yeah, where does it begin? Florian, what would you say to this question?
Yes, I just did some relaxing.
Yay, let's everybody do this. That's a good impulse, Florian. Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Rents go up. Oh.
Rents go up. So maybe the rents go up and then they go down. Oh yeah. Cool.
I think is it very you're absolutely. This is the question, and that's why I show behind me. This is by Ron Herron in the 1960s. He drew this place called Oasis. And it's a city, it's a dream of a city that I also dreamt when I studied. I thought cities are the most amazing thing. And I studied in London, and it was very cheap and it was just crazy. And I thought, this is where I want to be. And it has changed dramatically, and it has changed in the opposite what I thought the city should be. We have very little, we lost a lot of social housing because of a strategy to sell social housing. We always say we have not enough social housing, but we lost a lot by selling it, which is, I think, the absolute disastrous. And to buy back the Deutsche Wohnen is financially disastrous, because you have to pay much more than you would have if you wouldn't have not sold it. But I think the idea of it is very interesting, because we need to find a way that housing does not become that we cannot. We want to be in the city and use our money for other things than living, because in terms of economy, any other model is really stupid. If in Brooklyn you spend more than 60% of your income just in rent, and that just doesn't make sense, then for people this is really frustrating. So we should have not more than 20% of our income that we put in rent, and this is what we need to achieve, because that's what makes us. That's why we want to be in cities, not because we want to spend our money on rent, but we want to live there. We want to do things there, and it's a very clever way of living together. And therefore, we need a very clear strategy, not only for social housing, also for us. I mean. The middle class, if you look to Vienna, the middle class is absolutely part of supported housing. So for me, this is a very interesting move, but it's in terms of economy, it's a disaster. In the long run, it's a disaster, because we sold them anyway.
So repairing the damage done in the past when it comes to social housing. Yeah.
Oh, but if you buy them back, we're not going to pay the price of the market, because it's still an expropriation. But I don't know the numbers yet. I'll have to check it out. But it's good that we went into this direction. We actually wanted to do the two, because we also wanted to bring not only climate change and urban areas together, but also bring the social part, or the social justice in there, and how can the city evolve without getting much more expensive and only be affordable for rich people, but then climate neutral, so other people that can't afford it can just move somewhere else where the CO2 emissions are getting higher and higher. So how can that work together? Is it a way to expropriate the big housing companies and then give the places for less money to the people and renovate them? Or is there a different way?
I heard now two questions, and so I'm trying to figure out which one. One is that you talked about. I think usually my experience is that houses that are expensive are usually having a much a bigger footprint in terms of CO2 than social housing. Because in social housing, you have so little money that you have to be very experimental in terms of thinking. And so you have to really think about material, how could you be more efficient? How could you be more efficient with the footprint of the flats? And therefore, this is already the challenging part of architecture, I would say, the social housing, not the kind of housing where you're not so bound to restrictions economically. Is this answering your question? No, not really. No.
Not really.
I mean, I think that's the in urban development in politics for cities. That's the $100 million question that you have. It's really difficult. I mean, on the one side, in my opinion, everybody who comes to Berlin should find affordable housing, and that should be possible for everybody. And we have different strategies in Berlin at the state to get this. We're having with our state-owned housing companies. They building actually a lot of apartments each year to have more affordable housing, to have more social housing. But to bring this together, to keep the housing prices low and to keep the to make them also energy efficient, is really difficult. But I think the main cost driver of housing at the moment is really the financial markets, like the low interest rates in the markets. And that is for me the main problem in housing. To try to combine to make the houses more CO2 efficient and to keep the rent prices down is really difficult. And I don't think in any city there is a real solution for that. But we have to try to do both. So when we build new, we have to try to have a low rent prices, and we have I think pretty high standards when we build new houses on energy efficiency. So that's good. We try to keep the prices low, and also within existing buildings to make them more energy efficient and also keep the prices low. But it's a big task, because often the not so well renovated or not energy efficient houses, they can be the affordable housing in the city, and it's a conflict that is there, and you have to, I think, figure out what's in individual situation, what is the best solution, but there's definitely no easy solution for this problem.
Okay, but now I understand your question. I tell you what we're doing right now. First thing is called the so-called Konzeptverfahren. So we took part already in several ones. It's a new model that we were fighting for many years. So first of all, you don't buy any more land. You lease it, and you make a bet on the lease. So you pay very little in order to not put too much money in the land. And the second is, only the best practice can get the project. So they have to offer a huge range of social offers, working offers, social housing parts in it, affordable housing. And only if you offer this, you have the right to get the land. And I think that's the absolutely right direction. So this is something which is very strong. And then I think we also, as people, have to change. We also have to think how flexible can we be in changing the flat and moving out if we have too much space. How can we share a space maybe, or how can we maybe talk to people if we can change flats? What could be a new market that we can change flats very easily? I think it's not only the outside world, but we also, as the inside world, maybe have to think about there's so much space available. Why don't we use it in a much more flexible way? So I think it's from both directions. We have to start to rethink what is our home? How do we make our home? And and how could we change our home or shift, and what could be an exchange place?
Okay, so now I want to put a third layer on top. If I look at the climate clock, we have 7 years to get to net zero. Is there any way to achieve that in housing?
7 years, says the carbon clock.
I mean, that's what the Paris Agreement agreed to, and that's what Fridays for Future, for example, is going on the streets since years and doing it tomorrow too.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a really. I mean, I'm not like that kind of an expert actually in like how much CO2 is produced in which neighborhoods in Berlin, and how we could achieve it. I mean, in generally speaking, it's an overall goal for the whole country, and we as a city have to take our part in it. And I think it's getting more and more obvious also in the politics of the city, and also in politics on the federal level, that the issues is pressing more and more. So we see how I found it really interesting that every party for the election that we have in September, which will be, I think, a really important election for Germany, had the topic climate change now on every program on the very front. I haven't seen that before. So we see what will be possible out of that. In general, when you talk about the buildings, it's really difficult. I mean, we talked about the challenges that we have. We have a lot of like owned by private people. You have existing structures where people live, go in and out. So you have to always go into the areas where people live and might not like change in their neighborhoods or things. And it also has a lot to do that people, all the people itself, and Florian, you talked about it, and I think that's a really good point. We as a community, we as people have to decide to change something. And that's all things that need to happen, I think, to reach that ambitious goal. From a technical standpoint, I can't really say if that's possible or not. So.
It's a very good question. I feel like it's already -7, so I feel like we are already a bit over the top already. When my kids tell me in August we have reached the day, they come back from school, they say we've reached the day where we used our resources in August. I feel like, okay, wow, shit. I'm not too positive, not so optimistic. We try very hard to change it for our building sites. We try very hard to think about new ways of rethinking architecture as a part of an ecosystem. And as you might know, the Pritzker Prize, the sort of Nobel Prize, or the biggest prize you can get as an architect, has been given away 2 days ago to Lacaton Vassal, a French office who works really since years on these topics. So already there you can see there's a shift, but when you look at the, I don't know how you feel when you look at architecture in websites, you will see a lot of concrete. It's still a very, you still see a very old-fashioned idea of what architecture is about. And also when you build a building in timber, it's still 20% more expensive. So maybe we need the same as we now talk about electric cars. We need support support to make it zero, so we can build, we can compete. So there's a lot to do in our heads, in architects' heads. They're still very typical, I think, and also in the term how maybe the relationship between the city and architecture and the exterior and interior spaces are changing. But I think we should not forget that space is really such an important issue. Space makes cities, space is such a value for our life. And the quality of space is really, really important. And therefore we have to really challenge architecture and buildings. We have to push these guys hard, including us. and ask these critical questions. Absolutely, it's super necessary. It's a very strong lobby in this industry, and to change it is not so easy.
You also said that we as people have to change. That's something that I hear a lot, I would say, because it's really unconcrete. But how do we have to change? What is the person or the community in 2030 that could do that all? Or like, how is the person looking, or what is he or she thinking of doing?
Maybe we can open this question for the whole round.
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear what you think about it, and then.
So you can just raise your hand. Yeah, Marie? Marie?
Yes, I have to find my microphone. Yes, I think we can think about how many space do we actually need to live in, and adapt a little bit to live more in a community. And I think we are at the moment are on a way that everyone lives his individual life and looking for more space for him or herself, but not, maybe we just have to get closer together as a community and to live closer together as a community. But I'm wondering, because I was looking for a new apartment in Berlin, and it was really, really difficult, as yes, Tobias also already said. And I'm wondering, even if our living condition changes, if we live as a single or starting a family or something, we don't get the chance to just change our housing condition in the same way. We are stuck in this housing market at the moment, and maybe we need a chance to switch apartments easily with other people, so that our living conditions doesn't have to follow our housing conditions, but the other way around.
Are there other thoughts?
Yeah, just to answer that, I think Marie, you're absolutely right. It's and another point comes to it, that the rent prices in Berlin rose so fast over the last few years that people who are still having an old rent contract would never change their housing situation, because it's just so much cheaper. Even if they need less or more space, it's really hard to do. Yeah, I think that's something. I mean, we have, like, at the state, we have a project with the state-owned housing companies, where you can actually, like, apply online for if you want to swap your apartments. So the rents and everything stays basically the same. And if you find a swap partner who has, like, for example, a big apartment, and you're founding a family or something, then you could exchange apartments with that. But that's something that's just starting. But I think we need more of these ideas of how to do that. And I think it's really critical that we have this gap in between old rent prices and new rent prices in Berlin.
And also, if we look at the numbers, I mean that reducing the surface of the living space for each person is something that is standing in the BEK 2030. And that what you just talked about, there was a study, I looked into the new, how do you say that, where they just show every year how the product evolves. And that most of the people that want to swap apartments want actually a bigger apartment and not the smaller one. So maybe that's something too that people need to change in the way of how much space do I need for myself. What do other people think about it?
I think we should have a social villa and not a social small little box. So in a way, we have to think some space you can build very cheaply, but you can put much more. You can get much more out of it. we are still very bound to numbers, because that's also how you get money from to support for sustained housing. You get the money in relation to the square meters, and that's also, I think, you could make for the same price and for the same energy consumption probably much nicer spaces. Why shouldn't we not have enough space? I think it's just the way how we distribute it. Then there can be enough, because we don't, at the end, if we become so efficient with space, people will feel it. They will feel, I live in a very efficient place, and it's not, I'm not living in a space, I'm just living in a sort of efficiency place. So we have to be careful to make sure that space is still available, but at the same time interesting, it's fun to live in. It's light. It's a good place. I think that's what we all want, and there we have to do a lot of efforts to achieve both. And not just look at numbers, but really look at clever solutions. Like we did a lot of cluster flats where you share spaces. So you have if you have a very small flat room to sleep. Why do we have regulations for sleeping rooms? Let's make them small and make the living room really large. Let's open up all the regulations to really achieve interesting housing models. And you're right. I know about the swapping. It's really interesting idea of swapping places. Another way could be that we have more Genossenschaften. So then the economy right now, we have so little, not enough Genossenschaften in Berlin that people who live in Genossenschaften could swap into another one. It's very different to Zurich, where once you're in the network of Genossenschaften, which means, to all of you who don't know about Genossenschaften, the rent is fixed, and you can't sell or buy. You have a fixed rent, and that makes sure that we don't that the building is never part of a market for speculation.
I think that's a really good point with the Genossenschaften or with the cooperatives. But the problem there is, for me, or why we do the facilitation of bringing also the social justice into the round, is that how do you get in there, and what do you need to get into a corporation, and who's getting actually in a corporation? Is it the person that doesn't own that much money, or is it the person that is in a well-suited family with a good income? And I think that's something we're not talking about much yet, about like, who are the people that we're actually talking about? Who are the people that actually should be encouraged to talk about the neighborhood? Who can actually afford to do that for free and stuff like that? But there is Tilda, and she wants to say something.
Yes, I also think that is very interesting concerning the Konzeptverfahren, because who is actually able to come up with these concepts and design these concepts. And yes, you can include many social ideas into these concepts, but usually the people that design the concepts are still in a privileged position. And how can you ensure, Johannes already touched up on that, how can you ensure to actually include the people you want to build for or you want to design into the process, especially if their economic position, for example, does not allow them to do that in their free time, or they don't have free time.
I would also like to bring in also the climate aspect, like how are different communities and people in Berlin locally differently affected by the negative consequences of climate change, by the heat waves, biodiversity loss, particles in the air from fossil fuels, air pollution. And this is also a question of class and race, who are more affected in Berlin. So yeah, I would like to ask also in the whole round, how can we actually create or reform the housing and architecture so that it's actually climate just, not just climate, but climate just.
Tilda, you were asking a very, very interesting question, because when we built this one project at the River Spree, it's a Genossenschaft cooperative. we want the people that would get Hartz IV could not become Genossen, because as if you get Hartz IV, you're not allowed to have an ownership, and the Genossenschaft is a kind of ownership. So we could not even if we made flats that were available for this price, these people could not become part of it. So a lot of things. This is one part. So it's a stupid regulation which has to be developed. And the other question you are raising is how do you get a social mix into architecture? And that's since I know architecture is one of the biggest questions, because obviously the first projects we did as Baugemeinschaft were privileged people who knew how to discuss, who knew to fight for their rights, who knew how to cope with a group of 20 people of strong minds. And but we're looking now at a project which is in a very different region, but I can't speak about it right now because it's in the competition phase, which is a competition concept verfahren. And if we have the chance to do it, then this will be exactly what you're looking for. It's an area where we have to think very differently in terms of size of flats, in terms of the language, in terms of what kind of discussions, how do we construct the discussion. But you could maybe look at this project by Lacaton-Vassal again in Paris, where they built this tower at the Périphérique, and there was a social housing project where they won the competition because they didn't take it down. They left it, and they changed it into a really beautiful project with all the people living it, social housing renters could stay. So I think there are models, but it's a big challenge also for us as architects.
Mm. Thank you, Florian. And I'm looking at the time, and we also have one more comment in the chat.
And we haven't turned our shoulder.
It's true. How can this be? Let's take the elbows with. Let's take the elbows with us. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Oh. And then I have the feeling all of our screens are kind of dirty. So let's just also with the right hand and then with the left hand. Yeah, that's right. That's good. Looks better. Great. Michael also wrote in the chat as a proposal to create cooperative citizen housing management models and systems to target the platinum standards of sustainable building and maintenance. So this is actually now through this comment we can come to our closing question because the time flies. Now I want to ask you, take a pen and take a paper for yourself, possibly a thick pencil. Do our modern virtual people have that anymore? Take somewhere you can write at. And now I have a question for you all, for everybody. What is your vision for Berlin in terms of an environmentally sustainable and socially just housing situation? Draw yourself something, the first thing that you would see as a first concrete step towards it. It can be a symbol. Draw something like, what would be your vision for Berlin 2030, 2050 in terms of environmentally sustainable and socially just housing? What could be one element that's part of that? One concrete step. I'm going to post the question in the chat and you can have a small moment just to draw on your paper. What do you think? What could that be? I see great artworks forming up. Mm. 10 more seconds. Don't show it yet. Don't show it yet. The gallery is not yet open, Micha. Sorry. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The gallery is open. There you go. show your, go on, you can show what you've drawn or written. Great. And then I would like to make a small round. Show your picture again. Now you can put down your picture and then we go one by one. You show your picture and you say with one sentence, how do you imagine the vision for Berlin as a climate just city in the future? And we can start with Marie. You're still muted. One sentence.
Here I go. I would say houses with their own solar system on the roof, many people and community spaces, no cars.
Great. Then I have Tobias. You're still muted.
Thank you. I want to live in a neighborhood where I can do everything, where I can work, where I can live, where I can feel at home, where I can meet my friends, and I like the idea of no cars. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I have Violetta, and after that, Michael. You're still muted, Violetta. You're still muted.
I didn't draw a picture, but I think similar to Tobias, I'm imagining a space that's connected to transit, that's connected to green spaces, and that's connected to bike lanes. And I think large scale housing that is really architecturally innovative, and that's inspirational.
Great, thank you. Then I have Michael, and after that, Cornelia.
Yes, I want to live in Berlin as a city of action and modeling. Be proud of the city.
Cool. Then I have Cornelia, and after that, Florian. Did I get your name? Frau Konrad Beck? You're still muted.
I would like to have more shared houses, PV on the tops of on the roofs of the houses, and more bicycles, of course, and to share also the streets, Spielstraßen for everyone, not only for the kids but also for us.
Yay! Let's play more. Florian, and then I have Isabella.
Well, I haven't got a pen here and not a piece of paper because I rushed into this room where I'm alone. I can't be in the office. But behind me is New Babylon, which was a dream of the 60s, where we don't work anymore and we live in these play buildings where we can just have social connections. And I still think it's a wonderful project, and I want this kind of city.
Wow. Okay, then Isabella, and then Yannick, and then Anna.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah.
I only had a thin pen, but basically we've got like a rooftop garden, and it's like extensive. We've got like different types of larger trees, and then this is supposed to be, I just chose like any agriculture. I chose corn, like so that each little like building unit can actually like feed the inhabitants a lot. And then here's my drawing of a solar panel as well. And then like these really big like wraparound type of balconies, so that like they're all communal and the space is shared, and there are more opportunities for gardening as well. And then of course, people, bikes, no cars, as everyone was saying.
Right, cool. Then Yannick, Anna, and then Tilda.
Can we please get that drawing, by the way? I was not as I'm not as artistic, but I was also, and actually kind of foreshadowing another campus event, because I was also going for the solar panels on the rooftops of houses.
Cool. Anna and Tilda.
Yes, I'm very bad in drawing, but I also wrote no cars and streets to the people, and I'm also for more community gardens in the city and in the country yards of the houses, because they are mostly for cars or for the trash, but not for trees and plants.
True. Tilda.
I drew like a sign of circularity, because I think we talked about swapping houses and how like you can reuse materials, and I think that entails a lot, and it can entail like the environment stuff, but also the social stuff, and everything we should always find new uses for everything.
That's beautiful. Next, I want to ask Marian, are you there? Do you want to say your vision? Or Anya, would you like to share your vision? Maybe they are not with us anymore, but we're going to hold on that circular idea of Tilda and all the beautiful pictures that you shared. I think now it's really time to come slowly to our closing. Johannes.
Right. At first, thank you Tobias and Florian to be here, and thank you all to participate. It was the first talk, and we would love to get feedback because we want to improve during the next sessions. And it would be nice to hear from you how did you like it, and not only from the participants, but also obviously from Tobias and Florian, just from all.
Yeah. You can also give us some wishes. What would you wish for the next upcoming events?
You mean now?
Yes.
Yes.
Tobias, you want to start, right?
Of course. No, I really enjoyed it, and I mean it's difficult times at the moment, so obviously this would have been way nicer to be like close to each other and like talking in person, but I think you've done really the best you could do. I really liked the idea of having some people with us here in the chat, and I felt like we really got like kind of a talking situation to a high degree. So that was really, really good, and I enjoyed it. And I like the openness of the topics we were able to talk, that people were able to bring in their opinions and talk about what they want to talk about. So I don't know anything that I would say that I would need more if I would take part in the second one. So thank you very much for the organization and for this very important topic that we face in Berlin. Thank you.
No, I think the digital versions are quite interesting in terms of that we can do them very quickly now. We can have meetings and talk about topics, and also people can enter and share this. So for me, it's a quite at the moment we use this a lot at university, as I'm teaching in Kassel as a professor right now, and we're using it a lot to invite people from all over the world. So I would encourage you to continue with this topic in a serious way. I found it a bit difficult because you had a huge range of questions today, and I felt a bit I don't know if I could help you in this kind of sometimes a bit general answers from my side. The only thing I'm learning right now myself is that we tend, because I've seen quite a lot of solar panels as an answer. I've seen a lot of no cars, that we answer with the same answers that which generated the problem. So we answer with a lot of technology at the moment, and not with the question of social, also of our kind of what is the city really, what is really interesting about cities as a sort of social here social connection, and giving a feedback to your format. Maybe it would be good to make the question a bit smaller in terms of to be more precise, so it's would be easier for me to give more precise answers to your questions. But I think it's great that you're asking difficult questions, and you should.
Thank you. From the participants, maybe? Yeah, Tilda?
I think it was very cool that it was this interactive. I didn't plan to interact, but you got me to interact anyway. And yeah, I like also to what Florian said. I can agree. I think it's also a bit difficult to, depending on whom you are addressing, if it's someone like if it's an introduction to what is important in cities, or if it's a detailed discussion to the topic. But yeah, I still think there were very interesting topics coming up today. And yeah, I just stumbled across today, so I wasn't really expecting anything, but it sounds like an interesting format.
All right, thank you. Anna.
Yeah, thank you all for this nice event. It was really interesting. But I think it's better that you also announce before what kind of form you would like to make, because sometimes I also like it just to hear information and just, yeah, don't interact. And sometimes you are in the mood to interact. So yeah, it would be nice to know it in before.
Another voice?
Can I comment to you, Anna? Yes, because I think that what I really enjoyed about this, because this is what the city is about, a bit of risk. And I find this really boring when things are so prepared, especially in this kind of digital times. So I wasn't sure if I should move my shoulders with you, but then I got into it. So now maybe because I have this experience with my students and they're complaining how difficult it is right now to be in this kind of very strange digital world. And therefore I find it really important that we find ways of interaction. So I agree with you in a way that maybe there are other ones, but I think it's quite good to make this also become a challenge, because then these discussions might become a bit more risky.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll hand over to Yannick then.
Thank you. I'm so happy. I'm very, very happy right now. And I am so happy for the lively discussion. I was very, very happy for the active about the active participation of so many interested participants today. And I obviously wrote down those feedback points, and I found also the points, for example, Florian's point to make the questions more precise, very valuable, as well as Anna's point. I do agree with Florian again that interactive formats are great, but I think Anna's point was in the direction to know in advance if this particular format is interactive or not. So I think it's valuable feedback what we get here. I'm not last, right?
No. But do you have something to show us, Yannick?
I do have something.
A little goodie in the end before
I do
closing.
have something to show you. Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's do it. As I announced in the beginning, I was busy taking notes. While you were talking, I hope you can see this screen now. Please give me a sign if you do.
Yes, we can
Great.
see.
So this is the Miro board, and as I mentioned at the very beginning, you can also see it moving now, right? Me moving around here.
Yes.
Great. As I said, we will develop this further over the course of the campus. We have 5 more climate talks coming up, but just a glimpse into this one, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. We talked first, of course, about the climate dimension. I actually noted down that 2030 from Michael because I just loved it. We talked a lot about climate challenges. Just have a look at this one, 7 years. Particular challenges, what do we need to change in neighborhoods, a compact city, for example. Then, as you can see in this dimension, in this discussion, we talked a lot about the social aspect, actually, which I found interesting. You can see a lot of points here. a lot about the Konzeptverfahren, but also the critique to it. So who is designing these concepts? I think it was Tilda who made that point, or unemployed people not able to become shared owners in cooperatives. The important and very controversial question of we as the people have to change in what way, how much space do we need? I think that was an very essential aspect. Buildings as part of our ecosystem. So you can see we addressed a lot of social issues, or actually interdisciplinary issues. We had a lot of open questions as well. Thank you once again very much to the audience. The role of youth, I think it was Violetta who brought that in. I would have loved to hear more about that as well. We got a very good example with the Alles Andersplatz, but I think it's an important aspect that we should develop further over the course of the campus. And then, of course, also, again, the role of buildings as such. International, other examples, another point that should be expanded further, in my opinion. We also touched upon the issue of Deutsche Wohnen and IDs. This is actually where I had to expand the board because we got so many open questions that I didn't expect. So many important points. And here I noted down some of your visions. I also took a screenshot. I took the liberty of taking a screenshot of your beautiful drawings and also wrote down some of these, as you can see here. And at the very end, we just heard it. This is the last one that I didn't fill out, the feedback for this session. Thank you.
Great. Now it's time to find a closing for today. Also from our part, from the facilitation, thank you for taking part. Thank you for asking these questions. And next week, it will go on the 25th of March. We will have a session, similar session, Climate Talks to Private Household and Consumption. And we will also, after these talks, we will also have workshops and a conference where we will go deeper into the materia, into the proposals that also come from you, from the people who take part to our climate talks. And we will go into dialogue with the experts and with you as maybe also experts and citizens of creating together claims how to achieve climate justice in Berlin and how to achieve the climate goals. So keep tuned in, follow our Instagram, and tell about this to your friends, spread this in your universities, in your communities, in your contexts, and invite people in so that we can have more controversy and critical discussion, and maybe a little bit dreaming together as well. All right, maybe we can just put our mics on and say thank you and bye together, and hopefully see you soon again. Okay, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.